Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'll give everyone a couple minutes just to log on here. I am so excited for our event this evening. I cannot even tell you all. It's going to be amazing. So I am Stephanie, and I'm coming to you from the Novel Neighbor. We are an independent bookstore located in St. Louis, Missouri. And it is no lie when I tell you, I have been anticipating tonight's event for months. I am so excited. And it gave me an excuse to reread one of my favorite books, actually like two of my favorite books. So excuse me if I just get like two tonight. So tonight's author is Rebecca Serle. She is the author of 6 novels, including The Dinner List and When You Were Mine. She is also the co-developer of the hit TV adaptation of her YA series, Famous in Love, which is huge on Freeform. And she received her MFA from the New School in NYC and lives in New York and Los Angeles. She loves Nancy Meyers films, Bathrobes, which I feel like we've all gained an affinity for during this past year, and giving unsolicited relationship advice. So if anyone's feeling bold tonight, I think you can throw some things in the chat and we'll just see where we can go with that. So tonight we're discussing In 5 Years, which just released in paperback yesterday, which is super, super exciting. So please join me in welcoming Rebecca.
Hi!
Hello.
Nice to see you. Hello.
How are you tonight?
I am doing really good. We had like one of the only rainy days we ever have in Los Angeles today, so it was actually like kind of cozy and nice, and I'm just like here in my little turtleneck in my office.
Such a cute West Coast comment. We had rain for like a polar vortex like a week and a half ago, and now we're like back to amazing sun. And
I'm embarrassed. So I moved to Los Angeles full time about 16 months ago, and I lived in New York for 13 years before that. But as soon as I moved, I just lost any ability to be in weather below 65 degrees.
I mean, it's
like that too. It's crazy. Like it happens instantaneously. Yeah, I have like full Uggs on my feet. I'm not going to show you that, but it's a thing that's happening.
Oh my gosh, you're not kidding. I know, we're like begging for 60-degree weather here. We did hit 60 today, I think, but
congrats.
Yeah. Thank you. So do you go back to New York City right now at all, or are you totally LA?
I'm in LA. So I don't have a place in New York anymore. I gave it up 6 months before COVID hit, and I haven't really obviously been doing any traveling in the last year. So I will go back to just spending time there, but now I live in LA full time. I always feel a little bit like a traitor when I say that. I avoid eye contact. Because I was such a diehard New Yorker for so long, and I think anyone who's familiar with my work can really kind of see that. New York was such a character and so important in my books, so it's an interesting thing now to be writing outside of the city. But I love LA. It's great out here.
That's awesome. Wow, what an East Coast versus West Coast story.
I know. I'm blushing. I'm everyone from New York's gonna come after me.
Don't look at you. Okay, well, obviously, we are here to talk about In 5 Years, which, contrary to the one I'm holding, because this is my copy, was out in paperback.
Okay, here, look, we can show you. So because people have been writing me, and they're like, "What's the difference in the covers?" It's subtle, right? But you can see the artwork is different. Yes. So somebody was like, "We said it has a new cover." It does, and there's also new content, most importantly. But it's sort of a take on the cover.
Ooh, okay. We'll have to inquire about that. So for people watching who love your books but maybe haven't read In 5 Years yet, can you give them a brief rundown of what's the story? What are we looking forward to if you're opening In 5 Years for the first time?
Yes. So In 5 Years is the story of Danny Cohen, a young corporate lawyer living in New York City who has a very airtight plan for her life, knows exactly what she wants. We meet her on the day of her giant job interview, the place she's wanted to work forever. She nails her interview. That night she gets engaged to her boyfriend, and everything is going according to plan. And she comes home from their celebratory dinner, falls asleep on the couch, and wakes up and lives exactly 1 hour from 10:59 to 11:59, 5 years in the future. And she wakes up in an apartment she's never been before with a man that she's never met before. So she lives 1 hour there and then wakes back up in her normal life and thinks that must have all been some kind of crazy dream. And then 4.5 years go by and she meets the man who was in that hour with her. It's really a book about fate and destiny. And also it is at its core a love story between like two women, a love story of friendship. So it's really, I think it's a book to be read with your besties.
I totally agree. I think that's one of our bookstore's favorite things is the female friendship that's really on full display. So I have a question about that actually in a second. But first, I wanted to go back to, you mentioned that she lives this 1 hour in 5 years in the future, which is such a unique part of the storyline to me. And it's kind of like the only real like magical realism that's in the but the whole plot point is around this like idea that this happens or she had some kind of premonition, etc. What inspired that storyline for you? Where did you come up with that idea?
My last novel, The Dinner List, is if you could have dinner with any 5 people, living or dead, who would they be? And somewhere around like the end of 2018, I started really ruminating on the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I was like, it's just like an interesting conceit. And so the book is very much an answer to that question. I think all of my work back to my first book really, and a friend of mine always says like all writers are interested in exploring 1 or 2 themes like over and over and over again. And the theme I'm really interested in exploring is fate versus free will. So I felt like The Dinner List was a little bit about getting to go back in time and relitigate the past. And I wanted to tell a story about a woman who sees what's coming and how even if you can see what's coming, you can't see what it will mean, right? Like those hours when she gets there, like the hour is exactly the same, but the context is entirely different. So it sort of was birthed out of that question, honestly. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? My agent and I joke that my next book is going to be like the answer to like a bird in a hand is worth 2 in the bush. Like I keep thinking of all these idioms. I'm like, is there anything there? That's actually no. I'm like, is there anything there?
I don't know. Readers, is there anything there?
I know.
Yeah, I wondered that because I noticed that both titles, and if people aren't familiar with The Dinner List like you just gave us, they both play with that like 5-year semi-question. So I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
Back to Dani. So I think you kind of mentioned when you were like saying like, she checks all these boxes, but that's like really Dani's personality throughout the whole thing. Like she's very, planned and methodical is like how I think of her. Like, it's just very like, she knows what she wants. Like she wants this career. She wants like the perfect marriage, and not in like a negative way. Like, it's just like, she's working on checking all these boxes, and her best friend in the book, Bella,
Yeah.
I was blanking for her. I was like panicking for a second. I was like, did I just confuse things? Bella, she's like very wild and whimsical. So they're just like total opposites. And like, how did you develop these characters? Because I think they're both so interesting. You play with them together in their friendship so well. They're so complementary to each other. Where did you develop those characters?
So when I write a book, I always start with the conceit or the idea. And in this case, it was, as we just talked about, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then I think about, okay, who do I think is best to tell this story? And the reality is that the concept just doesn't work well if you have a woman at the center, if your narrator is somebody who's like very go with the flow, because then she'd wake up 5 years in the future, like in an apartment she hasn't been. She'd be like, dope, like look at these cool chairs I have and whatever. Like it only has weight if it's somebody who's really committed to the life that she's building and really committed to her vision of the future, and would be really upset about an image that comes in conflict with that. So it would have to be somebody who was like building something very specific, and that the vision was like a really significant departure from that. So that's where Dani came from, and then she began to sort of flesh out as this woman who really just knows what she wants. And I think I like her ambition. I like how unapologetic she is. She's a woman who really wants to succeed. She wants to make a lot of money. Like, I think that's rad. I think those are all things that I love to see in women, and I think are sometimes represented as bad characteristics. in female protagonists. I don't see them that way. However, she does, there is an element of Dani that is very rigid. And I wanted to give her a counterpoint in Bella. You mentioned who's her best friend, and Bella is really sort of like whimsical and you know, I guess the sort of ungenerous word would be flighty. She's somebody who like doesn't necessarily like follow through on all the things she does. She's really, really the counterpoint to Dani. And so you can see how there's this like symbiotic relationship between the two of them, right? Like they really do have this complete, this sort of like complete holistic thing between the two of them. And I think, you know, I think Dani's journey over the course of the novel is to really sort of like embrace her inner Bella. And I also feel like Bella's journey is to sort of embrace her inner Dani as well. Like they're both on a journey to kind of like come to terms with the parts of them that are manifested in their best friend.
Totally. I think that's, again, like one of my favorite things about this book is their like friendship and how you portrayed them, because I feel like, I think Mary, our bookseller, describes it as just like, it's two women in NYC living like their best professional lives and just like being awesome together. And so I'm just like happy that you wrote those characters for us. Are there like any friendships in your life that inspired their friendship? Is that like, was that drawn from anyone in particular?
I feel like, well, first of all, I don't know if it's Mindy Kaling who said this originally, but like best friend's a category, not a person. I fully subscribe to that.
Oh.
Probably have like 4 or 5 best friends, and they are women in my life who are just like I don't know what my life would look like without them, right? They're the most important, some of the most important relationships in my life. So I definitely experienced. I always say about my books that I don't think that the characters are necessarily based on real people, but the relationships are oftentimes based off of relationships of mine, and more often than not, they're a composite. So I would say Bella and Dani's relationship is kind of a composite of a few different female friendships that are really significant in my life.
I love that. Okay, so no spoilers for people. Don't worry, we won't spoil it for you if you're watching. But I know in the book jacket for the hardcover book,
yes,
and you kind of mentioned this when you were describing it. It says, "In 5 years is an unforgettable love story, but it's not the one that you're expecting." And like you kind of mentioned, like it's really love story of between these two best friends. What inspired you to kind of subvert that traditional love story characterization? Because it's still, I often feel like this book is still classified more romancy.
Yeah.
So, which is great because I think it kind of helps like throw you off a little bit and like, again, like kind of really like brings that through of like, I think by the end of the book, that's what you're really focusing on because of how you've just written it. So, but what inspired that kind of shift and not doing a traditional story?
I think some people have been a little mad at us about that. I love a good love story. Like I love a good romance. I love the genre. I love to read romance. I love to watch romance. Nora Ephron is probably my favorite filmmaker. I know I'm so original, but genuinely, I find like complicated female relationships to be more interesting narratively than I do romance. It's really hard to write a surprising, interesting, like heterosexual love story. It really is. And so I feel like that's, and I think probably my books are, because The Dinner List as well, like The Dinner List is a love story in some ways, maybe even more than In 5 Years. But to me, the most interesting relationship in that book is the relationship between the two women, the protagonist and her best friend. And similarly, in 5 Years, I think that the romance is sort of like a filter for the relationship between the women and not the other way around. I feel like traditionally we see friendship as being like a filter in some ways for like the central relationship of a, whatever it is, a book, a movie, a television show. Friendship is sort of the filter for the romance. And I just find it more interesting to like flip those things.
I think it is more interesting. Yeah, I think it is interesting because and that like line had caught my eye when I first started, but it was just one of those where like I saw it was you and I was like, so of course I'm going to read this, and like didn't even really read the cover a bunch, which I actually am starting. It made me feel like I want to do this like more and more because it was like so much of it was totally unexpected for me, just because I didn't have a lot of context going into it, which was actually like fun to hear these and not even have any introduction to Danny like until I just started reading about her. So, oh, we're getting lots of love in the chat. So I just want to highlight a couple comments for you to see. So Kelly loved the book, really appreciates when you can't predict what is going to happen in the story. So you got us.
I love that. I like to read books that are surprising. So that makes me happy that people feel that way.
And Barbara, oh, looks like I love this quote. Do you remember writing this quote? That's like really putting you on the spot. But if you want your dreams, you should look for abundance, not scarcity. Are you proud of that when you reread that?
I agree with that. I agree with the first one. Falling in love, falling onward. That's lovely. I don't remember that second one. I got to be honest. But the first one I stand by. I believe that that's true.
So thanks.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. Okay. So it definitely comes through in both the dinner list and in 5 years that you have an abundance of love for New York City, as we mentioned. So what was it like to live in New York City and write these books and like be around? Because you also have some really cool things paired with this. Like people can visit your website and you have a whole walking tour of NYC on there of going through the places that are in the book. So obviously you really love NYC. It really like inspired a lot of your writing. And so was that just because you loved living there, or like have you always, like prior to living there, did you know you wanted to live in New York City and like knew you wanted to write about it?
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. Please go to my website because we all worked so hard, and like we have a really, really cool book club material, and it has like a walking tour of New York. There's also like there's sample like dinner menus, and like there's like trinkets from all the different restaurants and places that they visit, and both the dinner list and in 5 years. So I'm like really proud of that, and I'm always hoping that people will go visit. New York. Well, okay. So two things. The first is that I grew up on, like, you know, we were talking about Nora Ephron movies, like a lot of, I think the like really significant, you know, Nancy Meyers, the really significant romantic comedies that I watched as I was developing as a writer and creator took place in New York. And so I definitely romanticized the city from a young age. When I was younger, my family lived in Philadelphia and then Massachusetts, and we would drive into the city, and I always remember loving it. It just felt like this magical place. Like there was just some kind of energy there that was palpable that I felt like I could reach out and touch. And so I always knew I wanted to move there, and I moved after college. And the second thing is that I spent my whole 20s there. And so I think that any place that you kind of grow up as an adult holds a certain kind of nostalgic magic. To me, that place is New York. So there are certain bars that hold like really like precious memories of falling in love, or you know, the street corner where I found out that I was going to be a published author for the first time, or like all of these, you know, the apartment that I lived with my best friend and roommate for 5 years, where like, you know, none of our bedrooms had windows. Like there are all of these, there are all these narratives of my life that city holds. And there's all these sort of like memories tucked away in different neighborhoods and different street corners. So it's both. I think part of it is just the magic of New York, and part of it is the particular magic for me because I spent such a significant portion of my life there.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is putting you on the spot, but now that you live in LA, is that probably going to lead to a possible location change, or are you still working on books set in New York City?
Yes, it is going to lead to a location change.
Ooh, that's actually, I find that very exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. And I'm glad you said that, because I remember thinking, I don't know if I knew for a while. So I'll just say, like, I started coming out to Los Angeles because my television show Famous Love shot out here. And so I was working out here. And the more time I spent here, the more I kind of realized that it was sort of, I say like the hotspot of my life was moving. Like I could just feel that this is where my life was now. It was not so much in New York. It was leaving New York. And I was so resistant because I was so scared about whether or not I would be able to write here. I just didn't know if I would be able to write. So I'm very happy to say that I can, and and I finished a book here, which I can't tell you about yet, but shortly I feel like we'll have some more information on that. And I'm really excited about it, and it does involve a location change.
Ooh, okay. So something for us all to note and look out for more details on. Before I forget, can you tell us a little bit, especially for those of us who maybe have the hardcover?
Yes.
What you mentioned that there's like extra content in the paperback. Not that I expect you to expose the content to us, but like, what are we talking about? What is?
Yeah. We're talking about there's like all kinds of, and again, like this is like, I'm just like pushing this because I think it's so cool and I love it so much. There's all kinds of like discussion questions. There's a conversation with me. There's new material. Like I answer a lot of like sort of larger thematic questions about the book, and that's all in the back of this. So it really is like, and I know I've been Skyping into some book clubs for the month of March, people who are reading In 5 Years or The Dinner List, and I think it's a really great thing for book clubs with the paperback to have all that material just like right here that you can turn to like get conversations started, and also some questions that you might have when you finish, I hope that we address. So that's all in the paperback, but not in the hardcover.
So, and something that, I mean, we have tons of book clubs, so I hope y'all are listening. Book clubs registered with us, that will like make sure we let everyone know about that, because I know it's super helpful for book clubs to have those supplemental materials. I feel like that adds to like an extra verve in your book club. And you mentioned you're doing, I saw this on the website, you can be requested to join book club, right?
And we still have slots available for March, I believe. So if you are reading The Dinner List or In 5 Years and you'd like me to join, you need to have 10 or more members in your book club, and then you can request for me to join. We have like, I think 15-minute slots up on RebeccaSerle.com. So if you're reading, you'd like to see me, then please request, and I would be delighted to join you.
So even more reason to visit your website, because all of that is on there.
All of that, yes.
Okay, I want to check back in. New York City is getting lots of love, I think, based off of that conversation. Betty wants to know what it's like to be picked for the Good Morning America book club.
It was really, really kind of amazing and really sort of just remarkable. So we had, basically what happened was we pre-taped a segment of Rachel, Lindsay, and I going to visit a book club in Orange County. And we had pre-taped that maybe like 2 weeks before publication. And then we all flew to New York, and I was like launching this 12-city book tour. Keep in mind the timing, this is March 10th of last year. So, at Good Morning America, it was still like we were doing maybe like elbow bumps, and it was kind of like it was coming, but it wasn't like right here yet. So we did our segment, and then the world shut down 2 days later, and I flew home from Boston, and that Monday was when the taped segment aired, and it was just this really incredible timing where everybody was home. So all of a sudden, a broadcast like, listen, Good Morning America gets millions of viewers every morning, and I don't actually have the numbers, but it was a significantly more people tuned in, and it was sort of this really wonderful thing where in this time where we were so isolated and so separate, I felt like the book was really this connecting fiber for other people, and then for me, like just seeing the way people were reading it, enjoying it, and passing it to friends, and kind of getting to connect from different locations. So it was wonderful, and it allowed us to have a platform that I know we're all super grateful for.
Just congratulations on being chosen for that. I'm sure that's like so exciting. Is that up there with like, what would you say are some of your like top moments? Because like you mentioned that there's a special place in your heart for finding out that you were going to be like the intersection where you found out you're going to be a published author. Is this like another one of those like up there moments of finding out that they had chosen it?
It was really great. It was really, yes. I think having the pilot of my show picked up was another really significant one. But I mean, I could honestly make a list that's just comprised of In 5 Years moments. Like I feel like probably 1 through 5 would be on In 5 Years, because it was, I've never had an experience like this. The last year has been really special. It was my first New York Times bestseller. It was just, there's just been so many things for this book that I'd never had before, and that just so many career highs this last year, which odd time to be having like the ride of your career, but I feel very lucky and very grateful that I got to experience that last year.
Yeah. Okay. We have a question about the audiobook. Will you narrate the audio version of the book? If not, Jesse would like to know if they can do it.
That is so kind. So here's the deal, Jesse. I did the audio for the dinner list, and it was universally just trashed, I guess is maybe the right word. Like I really I just comment after comment of people being like, I know this book doesn't suck, but like if you listen to it, it definitely sucks. Or people saying like, I don't know, the voice sound. I'm not even gonna try. It was really, if you really want to feel like just intimately shamed, like people telling you they hate your voice is like a great way to do it. It was, I loved the experience of recording it. I thought it was so fun. It does not seem like the public is wanting that from me again. So I hear that. We have a wonderful audiobook for In 5 Years that's narrated by Megan Hilty, who's incredible and wonderful. And it's just like a truly professional, excellent audio. So I would recommend that to anybody who listens to audiobooks. And I love an audiobook. I've sort of recently gotten a little bit more into them. So.
Oh, I'm so sorry that your voice was.
It's good. You listen, you can't do everything. You know what I'm saying? But fine.
I happen to feel like your voice is great. Which I hope means
that's about it. But thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, I think that's a real question that I've actually would love to kind of talk about just slightly more, not the audio version, but obviously In 5 Years is very well received. But what is that like for an author? Because I think there's something about, like, I'm sure it must feel so vulnerable to put out something that you've worked so hard on, especially like you never know how the public is going to respond at first. And then to start getting that feedback in, and like, what is that process for you as a writer to kind of handle some of that? Because I've certainly seen some authors say, like, if you're not in love with my book, like, please don't tag me in your like Bookstagram post, like evaluating it. Because we're all entitled to an opinion, but like, I don't know. Do you want to hear feedback? Like, and what is that like for you to have to deal with putting something so vulnerable out into the world and then have to receive what people think of it?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think that for me, seeing as this is my 6th book and I've been publishing for 10 years, it's gotten a lot easier to like go through that process. And I sort of understand what that is and that it's necessary. And I really, a lot of writers will say that they just write for themselves and like, you shouldn't write for an audience. I really write because I like it. I like to dialogue with my reader. I write so people can read and so we can be in conversation, we can share ideas, and this thing can be something that exists beyond me. So I don't struggle with putting things out there as much as I used to. And I've also been lucky, honestly, in my career that it took a long time to have a book that like people shared and read really widely. So I got sort of practice on various skills, and certainly like having a show and working in Hollywood was really good practice because you just have to have a very you have to have very tough skin for that. I'm like, why can't I talk? So I like it and I welcome it. I'm not on Twitter. I love Instagram. Sometimes people will tag me in negative reviews. Like, I think that's fine. It doesn't make me thrilled. It doesn't really bother me. It kind of is what it is. And I love seeing people, like, I love seeing people's photos of the book. I love seeing people like holding up the book in book clubs. I love, when people will tag me in reviews. I know people, like, I know it feels like, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I feel like it feels like kind of BS when authors say like, oh, I don't care either way, or I don't read it. It's not that I don't care either way. It's just that I sort of understand that that's part of the energy of putting something out into the world now, and I accept it. So how I feel about it just matters less, I guess, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Just like hold your hands loosely. Like, it's, yeah.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's actually excellent life advice. Hold your
well, on that note, Jane was also wondering, seems most authors experience a great deal of rejection before publishing success. What rejections have you experienced? And like, because you mentioned you've been doing this for 10 years. So how have you grown in that process? You just said like, you've grown to care like less and less, like you understand it's part of the process. What was that like for you? Like, I think I'm like gearing this question more towards like, you know, if you were talking to a new writer, someone who is just getting started, like, how did you get to that point, and like what helped you kind of accept that part of the process?
I think you really need to have resilience and conviction. Like, I think you need to really know that you want to write, because it is very easy to do anything else but write. I had so much, way more than I have now. I'm sorry, because I feel like my editor and agent are on this broadcast, but that's the truth. I had so much conviction when I was younger, and I wanted it so badly. I really feel like, looking back, there was not, like, it was Tony Robbins, who I really like, always says, if something isn't working, change it. If it's not working, change it again. Like, keep changing it until it works. And I feel like that's really good advice for anyone starting off in your career. Like, keep honing something. Don't be afraid to pivot. Like, don't be afraid to, I always say, like, writers ask me, should you write to the market? And I say, like, no, you should write the truest, most authentic story that you have to tell, but also you should be aware. Like, don't write with your eyes closed. Like, be aware of what's going on in the world, be aware of trend. Like, I feel like it's very important to be educated about the landscape that you're interacting with. And I think just having conviction, like, really, and this is the other thing, like, really try to fall in love with writing. I really think it is BS when writers talk about how hard it is. Sure, it's hard. It's also just like, it's not manual labor. It is, I continue to see writing as like a real gift. Like, I really do. I feel like it is this kind of magical force in my life that I feel extremely lucky to have been bestowed with. I know that it's like a calling to some extent. And I think the more you can really fall in love with it, the more you can remind yourself that it's a privilege, the more you can really enjoy the process, I think the easier it becomes. So conviction and love.
I love that. It's also, I didn't mean to pun on that, but those are things I think easy. We're doing a lot of things with our hands this evening.
I'm just trying to show you guys my sleeves, okay?
Yes, everyone needs to appreciate her puffy sleeves. You're so fashionable. With your headband too. And please note, everybody, the middle part. Gen Z would approve.
Young people tell us we have to use the middle part now.
Yes. Skinny jeans are out, middle parts are in. Noted. We're on board. So you received your MFA in creative writing. Did you have to have other jobs after receiving that, or did you get to go straight into writing? I just always feel like for some authors, there's some really hilarious jobs that they had to do in the meantime.
Yeah. Well, I had like a million jobs in between I worked for this like very famous designer. Just like, I guess my job was just steaming clothes. Now, like, looking back in hindsight, I'm like, what even was my job? I just stood in this closet and just like steamed clothes all day long. It was so bizarre. Anyway, after I graduated from, so at the time that I was getting my MFA, it was straight out of college, and I was working part-time as an intern / assistant at a publishing house, and also part-time as an assistant at a literary agency. And once I graduated, the job at the literary agency, became more than part-time. And then I started consulting on other people's manuscripts, and I would help, like, I would work on proposals. So like a lot of nonfiction writers who were maybe like not writers themselves, but had a story to tell, or were writing like a prescription of like diet or health or whatever. I would help them, like I would basically help them like type up a proposal and work with the agent to sell that book. So I did a lot of that, which I actually loved. I thought it was really satisfying to like help someone who has a message but maybe doesn't have the words. I loved that. And then I got very, very, very lucky. I sold my first book when I was 24, and I've been writing full time ever since.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I got very, very, very lucky early, but I really loved helping people. I loved editing. I really enjoyed and found it like very satisfying to help other people with their work as well.
I would imagine. Yeah, I think that's, I don't think often a lot of us think about what all goes in the background that like requires us to get these amazing books and titles, but there are some really cool stories to tell. And so I'm glad there's people to help kind of frame and put words around that. As somebody who like has had a lot of people do that for her in her life, like writing is not my skill set or my forte, I should say. And editors are just amazing.
Oh yeah, everybody. It takes a village, like it does with anything. So,
well, and so kind of switching gears on that, but still like what it must take a village to do your Famous in Love, which is also behind you.
Yeah. I'm like, we were talking before, the mirror image is very strange on this thing. I don't know like which side I'm supposed to turn to. Like it feels like I should do that, but that's making it worse. Okay, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. It was adapted for television. So that's, you have 2 books. Well, because like there's the Famous in Love book, right? And then there's the sequel. And then they received a TV adaptation and you were heavily involved in that. And like, what is that process? Because I think we're starting to see that trend more and more where some of our favorite books are turning into like limited series or ongoing series or movies, especially with like the involvement of Reese Witherspoon and everyone else kind of in this like overlaying worlds. And so what does that even look like for a book to turn into an adaptation? And as somebody who got to be heavily involved, I am imagining, in that process, what was that like for you to adapt it?
Well, it was 6 years ago, and at the time that I did it, I don't know if another author had, and this is not me like tooting my horn or anything like that, but I don't know if another author
toot your horn
had created to show off of their own work. And I think it's such a wonderful thing now that authors are so much more involved in their adaptations. Like I think that that's great and necessary. I think for a long time, people saw, or Hollywood, I should say, saw authors as being like, I don't know, these little kids who maybe just were like, didn't get it. Mm-hmm. And it's ridiculous because no one's ever going to like really understand your story as much as you are. And so it was everything. It was wonderful and amazing, like the most exciting probably career chapter of my life. It was also extremely challenging and difficult. It was a world in which that I had like really never played in. And so it was such a giant learning curve. And it also required a huge level of talking about like loose hands. It involved a huge level of like opening up my fist, which was a hard lesson. It was really hard for me to do. And I'm really glad that I had it and that I went through it, because I think for any author who wants to either have their work adapted or adapt their own work, you need to have a level of distance from the material. Like, I think that, and I'm not saying anything revolutionary here, but, film and television are both like extremely and extraordinarily collaborative mediums, and writing in a lot of ways isn't. Like novel writing isn't. It is certainly once you have a manuscript, what we were talking about, like how key your editor is and your agent, your like all of these people become like it would be impossible to do it without them. But the actual writing process is very solitary. And so, and in television and film, it's not. Everybody has a voice, everyone's in, it's a studio, it's a network, it's other writers in your room, you're making this thing together. So I think it does require just a level of like opening up and being, and being open and willing. And for me now, I kind of embrace that because writing is so solitary. Now I really love collaboration in that area of my life because it's fun. It's fun to hear other people's voices and opinions off of things that you make. And it's just fun to see a different side and have a different take. So it was wonderful and really, really, really challenging for all those reasons. Like it was hard to do this.
Well, because I imagine writing your book is very different than writing a script to go along with the book.
Yeah.
Was it hard to like hone everything in and think of it like episodically?
Yeah, so I now, because I've done a few other adaptations, both on material of mine and other people's, and I think that when you're looking at a book, the 2 important things to remember in an adaptation are like the characters and the relationships between them, and everything else you can kind of check at the door. So if you're trying to adapt a book and you want to be like super, super, super close to it, that's a really, really hard thing to do. I think like plot, setting, these are major things, right? Like the plot, what actually happens over the course of the book, it matters so little. What really does matter is the characters and their relationships. So like, for instance, like in an adaptation of In 5 Years, I think the most important thing would be Danny and Bella and their relationship. And the rest, like the actual story about what happens becomes becomes, it has to stray, because you need to be able, especially for television, you need to be able to open it up, right? Like, you know, like a book is like this and its show has to be like this. So even as you're moving linearly, you're going to have like all of these sort of like circular pockets that open up, because you just need a tremendous amount more story in television than you do in a book.
That makes so much sense. But thank you for sharing that, because I feel like a lot of us just get to appreciate the process at the end and don't really know what all has to go into that. And I've been very curious, you know, at least especially, again, like I feel like a lot of us have spent a lot of quality time in front of our televisions in the past year, watching these adaptations and really begging for more, because binge watching. So speaking of adaptations, do you have a cast of people in your mind, if In 5 Years was ever to be adapted in some kind of way, of who would play, especially some of these like key roles like Bella and Danny?
No, I really don't. I'm so sorry. I don't know the answer to that question. And I always say, like, I think that the reader is way better equipped to answer that than the writer is. I write with characters in my head that are sort of like amorphous, but like very, very clear to me. And I know that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So it's hard sometimes to step out of that and imagine them. I mean, there's so many wonderful, you know, actors and young actors and actresses that I admire and like. I never know how to answer that question. So I'm sorry, I don't.
No, totally fine.
Maybe some readers have some ideas for
it. If you're watching and have ideas of who you think you should play some of these characters, feel free to drop them in the comments. I always love asking that question because it's so funny. I think there are like there seems to just be like two stark contrasts. Like there's no in between. Like I feel like an author either like is like, yes, this is who I pictured like the whole time, or like this is maybe not even the whole time they were writing it, but like this is what this is my immediate picture now. Or they're like, I've never even considered that. That's just not part of my like thought process and thinking about my book, and I have no idea who. But I do think it's a favorite pastime of readers to think about.
Totally.
Okay, Caitlin would like to know, how long do your book projects typically take from start to publication?
So thank you, Caitlin. I have sort of like a strange writing process. I write usually a book a year, and it will take me anywhere from like 2 to 3 months to write a book. So I write really quickly in that first draft, and then I'll edit probably for another like 6 months with that first draft. Let's see, I finished the first draft of a book in June. And then the edits, we're still working on edits now. Maybe they'll be done in April or May. And then, actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this yet. Let's say 2 years. Like I think that, I know as I'm talking, I think that, so better example. In 5 Years, I wrote In 5 Years was fast, but that's okay, because I think that's sort of the structure. In 5 Years, I wrote in the summer and fall of 2019, 2018, and then the book came out March of 2020. So it's about sort of like 18. The whole process ends up taking about a year and a half, let's say.
Okay.
Sorry for that convoluted answer, Caitlin.
No. I just love the mid thought of being like, oh, let's switch gears. Different example. But to go back to your earlier comment, Michelle said that she totally understands what you meant by amorphous and yet really, really clear. Because she's also never been able to explain that. So thanks, Michelle. You're not alone.
I'm very seen. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, what was I just going to ask you about your question of oh gosh, there I am. Whew.
Yeah.
So back to your writing process. Has that been impacted at all in the past year by COVID-19, or were you always kind of like writing at home, and so like your daily life didn't change much professionally?
Well, it was such a strange thing, because I was launching this book into the world. I mean, we really my pub date was March 10th, and then I was supposed to be on tour for the next 2 weeks. So when everything shut down and I got sent home, I was still like in this really odd mind frame of like, it was a great distraction too, because it was at the very, very beginning and we were trying to do these virtual events, but like Zoom didn't even really exist and we didn't even really know what it was. And like everything is so streamlined now virtually, which is incredible. Nothing was that way in March because none of us knew how to do it. So it was this really odd time. And then I kind of emerged from that and I was like, I think I need to put my phone down for a little bit. And I started writing in April, and writing was like just the biggest escape because it was at the beginning of COVID, and it was that time where like none of us could really see anybody or even like go outside. Like the hiking trails in LA were closed. It wasn't like, now where you can like sit outside a coffee shop or whatever. There was nothing happening. So it was this really like kind of special 2 months where I got to escape into this like other universe and tell the story that had been percolating for probably about a year. And I really loved that. And I haven't done any really consistent. I'm working on some television projects that have required my attention in the fall and winter, but that was kind of like the concentrated writing time I did. So, and I also moved. It's been sort of an interesting year, and I think that some writers are writers who write every day and feel like that's super important to their process, and that's how it should be. I've never been that kind of writer, and so I think this year has more been a process of me just embracing the way I kind of organically am as an artist and trying to be less judgmental about it, maybe for my own benefit, let's say.
I feel like that's like advice that all of us just need to hear, like regardless of what our art form or profession is, like just accepting how we operate within that.
It's important. It's hard to do, but it's important.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm glad that has been like what your past year has kind of brought and looked like. I do want to give another shout out to Caitlin because this feels appropriate. Caitlin said that her and her bestie are watching together, which is like perfect for this book.
I'm so happy. I would one of these roses if I could. I love that.
Yes, I do love the flowers that are sitting just off to the side now. They really add something.
I'm really trying to frame this up because again, like my sides, everything's gotten a little bit mixed up, and there's this weird double frame happening. So I'm just trying to create a little.
It looks great. No, you've done a great job artistically. I really feel like there's still a vibe coming off. It makes sense. Okay, so I think we got everybody. All right, just one last shout out to everyone. Feel free to put some questions in the comment section. We have like just over 10 minutes left, so I just don't want to. This is your chance to ask questions, and I don't want y'all to miss out. Okay, so this is kind of like a weird question, but I was really trying to think of something. I was really like thinking about this like 5 years theme. Yeah. So go with me here on this.
Okay, I'm with you.
If you had to like relive or live like a span of 5 years, would you prefer 2015 to 2020, knowing what 2020 was going to bring, or 2020 and just going forward through 2025? Like, so basically either starting with the bad or ending with the bad, if that makes sense.
Right.
Which would you want to have to live twice? Which would you want to have to do? Because I guess my point being like, you don't know what happens between now and 2025. So do you take your chances with that, or would you, I don't know, 2015 to 2020 wasn't all bad for you. So would you have to go back and relive?
It was a really good span of years. I would always vote to keep moving forward though.
Okay. That's
moving forward. So yes, my answer would be 2020 to 2025 because I'm excited to see what it brings. Although the last 5 years have been like there were plenty of moments that I would really love to relive, and I've actually for a long time been trying to figure out a book that is based around that idea, and I haven't quite landed on it yet. So if anybody has any ideas, please DM me. But that idea of like there are these moments in time that seem to be sort of universes. It's a little bit back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this chat about New York, kind of like holding memory and kind of like revisiting some of that. But I've never just been able to like zero in on what that is.
Well, you heard her, friends. Send her a DM if you can figure out if you have a pitch for an idea of how that would work. Okay, so I have some kind of like rapid fire.
Okay.
Totally nothing to do within 5 years.
Great
questions. Just like getting to know you better as a person.
That'd be great.
Okay. This might be cruel, and I'm really sorry. Nancy Meyers or Nora Ephron?
Oh, um, I guess, I mean, for the purposes of this chat, let's go with Nora. She is quoted in the opening of Infighter.
That's fair. That feels. They're both amazing, though, right? Aren't you fans of both of them?
Oh yeah, hugely. They're both amazing. Yeah.
Well, okay, and so to give Nancy some love, something's got to give, or it's complicated.
Something's got to give. Something's got to give is probably in my top 3 favorite movies of all time.
I feel so personally hurt by that answer.
You think It's Complicated is a better movie?
I can't say. I'm not really I am so partial. I love Meryl Streep more than like most things on this planet. So I feel
like I feel that way about Diane Keaton till the end of time.
Okay, so that makes sense. I mean, Something's Gonna Give is an amazing 90s, just like beautiful.
It's so good.
Okay, sorry. Back to the questions. Well, to keep on that theme, who is the most famous person that you've ever met? I assume it's not Diane.
This is so hard. I mean, who would it be?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
No, this is like.
We can skip it. We can.
No, I really want to answer. I mean, I once met J.K. Rowling at a book signing. That was very cool.
I'm sure that was cool at the time.
Yeah. I'm staring at her book right now, so I'm like, I met her. I don't know. Can we circle back to it?
Yeah, keep thinking. No, keep thinking. It can also be, which I mean, maybe you kind of already answered it. I was going to say, we could also talk about just like, who would you want to meet if you want to like manifest this meeting? But it sounds like it would be Diane Keaton.
Yeah, it would 100% be Diane Keaton.
Okay.
Really, really, really invested in her. It would be Diane Keaton. Well, I did this for the last book, the dinner list. I had to make all these fictional lists of like, who would the 5 people I'd want to have dinner with me, and it was like Nora Ephron and Diane and Joan Didion also, who I really
who else is on that?
I did once briefly meet her also, and she's just, I mean, like I don't think talk about somebody who I'm just like fully in awe of.
Joan Didion, that's her for you.
Would definitely be that person for sure.
Okay, so Joan Didion, Nora Ephron, Diane Keaton.
Yeah.
What are the other two?
Like my grandparents, right? Like my grandfather, who the dinner list is dedicated to, who died when I was 2. Like some, like then like the rest of it, I think is like personal answers. But the like famous people were all basically Nora Ephron and Diane. And Nora could cook, maybe if she wanted to.
You're not forcing that on her. Yeah, just an idea. Just an idea.
Yeah.
Okay, the place that you most want to travel to.
I really, 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 really miss Italy. Italy, like Positano is just one of my favorite places in the whole world, and I'm really, really hopeful to get to go to Europe maybe at the end of this summer. So, yeah, that's my answer. I mean, anywhere, I guess, is the answer to that question, but
yes.
If anything's on the table, Italy.
Yes, everything is on the table. You answered perfectly. What book are you reading right now?
I just finished a reread because I'm doing an event with her tomorrow night of The Immortalist, Chloe Benjamin's book, which I loved. And I think it'll be like an interesting talk because there's a lot of similarities. The last time I read it, I don't think that the dinner or Inside Yours was out yet. So I'm excited to chat to her about that. And I also recently read Anxious People and just like really, 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 really loved it. And I'm sort of looking for a book. I'm kind of on this tour and I'm sort of like in between reads. So if anybody would like to rec something that they couldn't put down, please tell me.
Yeah. Drop us your favorite recent reads. Yeah, Anxious People, Frederick Bachman, amazing. So good every time. So good. Yeah.
That book's incredible.
Here's like such a random question, but have you tried to make the TikTok pasta recipe?
No, I haven't. And I really do want to because that feta looks really good.
It does. Doesn't it look so appealing every time you see it?
It really does look really good. And I feel like really proud that I know what you're talking about.
Yes, I should explain. I should say.
Yeah, maybe some people don't know.
Yes, there is like, I've heard more and more that, I mean, even the bookstore's owner's son, like he's learned to cook completely from TikTok, but
Yeah.
there's like one TikTok recipe in particular that's like just a block of feta with grape tomatoes and like some olive oil and I don't know, some other stuff like mixed in. You just like bake it and make some pasta and then you just like smoosh it on.
Yeah, and the cheese sort of melts and the tomatoes like roast down and it sort of creates this creamy sauce. And then you mix it into the pasta. I guess, I don't know. People are doing it with a lot of different kinds of pasta. That's a little controversial maybe. There's like some that are better than others. I don't know.
Oh.
I'm not on TikTok. So
I know.
Sure.
I'm barely on TikTok. I tried making that this week. I've now seen edits that are like the adult version of it, which is like still the same concept, but just like a couple other things you can throw in that also like roast well in the 40 minutes that you put it in there. So that's
okay, I like that. Maybe add some garlic, some
spinach, I think was a suggestion. Some red peppers, I feel like that's what I saw. Some sausage, I think that was thrown in there as an idea.
Okay. By the way, can I answer that previous question really? Because this just popped into my head.
Yes.
Once, unbeknownst to myself, and I can't reveal more of this, but I was invited to a dinner party, and it turned out that it was at Bill Murray's house. So I spent the evening with Bill Murray. He's wonderful.
I was like, please don't tell me that he's not great, which I don't know if you can say that.
No, like really just funny and like weird. But yeah, it was a million years ago in New York, but I just
that is awesome. Yeah. I mean, shout out to Bill Murray.
Awesome.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
A morning person for sure. I get tired at like 5 o'clock. I mean, if I could live in a universe where you eat dinner at 5 and go to bed at 8 and wake up at like 6, I would be so happy. That's sort of my dream. It's not always realistic, but yes. Are you a night person?
Yes. Yeah. I'm in this weird like shift because I'm married a morning person.
Right.
And so there's been this like slow evolution of like, I wake up now at like 6:30, which feels very early for me. I'm not out of bed at 6:30. Like I'm still working on like the productivity part of being a morning person because I feel like I'm not there yet. But
I like a lot of like throat clearing space. So like I'll wake up at 6, but I don't even really start. Like I like to exercise in the morning and that like I like to have time and not feel like I'm like so rushed to get to, my desk or answer emails or whatever. So I like to wake up and just like have that space.
I love that phrase, throat clearing space. I'm going to start using that. Do you know your Enneagram number?
You know what? No, I'm not sure. So I'm like very into astrology and a lot of things. The Enneagram, I don't know. Somebody recently told me what they thought I was, and now I'm blanking on what it is. Okay. I'm not as familiar with that like modality as I am with others.
Oh, do you know your Myers-Briggs? Is that what?
Yeah, I think I'm an INF. What's the last thing? No, INF, J or P? Is that what the last one is?
INFS? Is it I think it's an S or a J. Oh, God.
Medium INFJ. I got to ask my friend.
I don't know what the J would stand for, so that doesn't feel right. I was like trying to think through that.
I think the last one is like judging versus perceiving or something like that.
Yes, that's what it is. Yes. Okay.
So maybe I'm an INFP. I feel like I'm an INFP, but I have to ask Lila.
Okay, we're getting a lot of comments about 6:30 is an unholy hour of the morning. So people are not on board with being a morning person. People love that you remembered you went to a dinner party with Bill Murray. Great. And we have 2 book recs for you.
Oh, great. Okay, tell me.
Writers and Lovers by Lily King.
Yes, I want to read that. Thank you for that reminder.
And 3 o'clock in the morning by, I honestly am so sorry, I don't know how to pronounce this person's last name, but Carafiglio, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Great.
I think it's a newer release. Or not.
Love that. Thank you, guys.
Also a March release. Yeah. If I remember correctly.
Okay,
okay, last this or that, which I feel like, and I just want to pre-apologize, I didn't know how hard this would be when I thought of it. Mm-hmm. East Coast versus West Coast.
Mm-hmm. West Coast.
Wow, full conversion.
I fully converted, guys. It's really great out here.
I was gonna say, this feels like really just a testimony to LA, like not a diss on NYC, just like
no, Los Angeles is just great. Like, I mean, I think this is the first time I've seen rain in like 6 months. I don't know.
I mean, that sounds pretty good right now. Coming off of a St. Louis winter, that would be very appealing. So I don't think we can judge you. Well, I just have to say thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is amazing. Oh, I need to put for anyone watching, I don't think I've said this yet. We have signed book plates. You signed all of them by hand. I know that authors work so hard to get those to us. Your hand must be like so done by the end of it. So we have those to go along with a purchase of In 5 Years. But we so appreciate you stopping by. You're just so lovely to talk to and so fun. And my only wish is that we could be in the same room because I feel like you have such great energy that everyone would love to just like experience. But thank you. And we wish like such a great, like happy birthday pub week for the paperback version of In 5 Years.
Thank you so much. Back at you to everything. This was honestly like such a delightful event. You were so wonderful. And it's just like so fun to spend this hour with you and with all of you. So thank you guys so much.
Yes. Thank you for everyone who tuned in and commented and gave us interaction. It's like, that's the one nice thing, especially during these like digital events, is to see, you can't see your faces, but it still feels like we have that same love that we'd have at any other book event in the pre-COVID times. So thank you, everyone. And I did want to mention, again, you're doing Instagram Live tomorrow with Chloe Benjamin. You guys are talking about like kind of both, you're going to probably talk about both books, right? Well, not both books. You have more than 2 books, but In 5 Years and The Dinner List. And Chloe Benjamin is talking about The Immortalist and another book.
Well, the conversation will probably be mostly centered on In 5 Years and The Immortalist because there's a lot of like really similar thematics. We also, honestly, we really predominantly want to just like take reader questions and answer like whatever you guys want to know about our writing process and how we work, publishing, whatever. So we really thought it would be a fun opportunity to just get to have our readers ask us whatever they'd like to know. So that's really what we're there for.
Yeah. So perfect opportunity if you all think of something between now and tomorrow night and you're like, man, I wish I would have asked that yesterday. Yeah. You get another shot right away. So that's tomorrow evening. And also if you're not in St. Louis, we are happy to ship In 5 Years. So please feel free to also order online and we'll still make sure you get your copy. So thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you all later.
Thank you. Good night.